So the Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker, is bad. I'm sure everybody knows it's bad. It's really bad. And you might be saying, how bad can it be? And think of how bad you could imagine something, and then times that by 100. And you might be somewhat in the ballpark of how terrible The Rise of Skywalker is. And then you're asking, well, is it worse than what was the one before it? The Last Jedi. And the answer is yeah, it's quite a bit worse actually. It's astonishing how terrible it is, and it's terrible on so many levels. I'm going to start off by saying I'll admit that I think I might actually be wrong about what I was saying about Star Wars when I covered The Feminist Awakens, and I don't know if I ever covered The Last Jedi. Probably at some point I made reference to it, but my sort of thinking is these things are well thought out, they're plotted out, much like the Marvel Cinematic Universes. Yes, they change things, they come up with new ideas, they interject new storylines and stuff like that. But having seen this last installment of the Disney Star Wars, it's clear that they made it up as they went along, because it's almost impossible to make such an incoherent mess of a story. It makes no sense. It is just a giant awful mess that is it's dumbfounding how terrible it is. And yet, it's going to make gazillions of dollars. People are going to go see it. And then you say, agendas. What are the agendas in it? Well, the diversity and all those agendas are in it. The feminist sort of Mary Jane sort of characterization of Rey is everywhere. The destruction of the family, which I've talked about in length. In fact, that's what now I'm thinking about, discussing The Last Jedi and the themes about the destruction of the family nucleus being a huge part. I mean, it goes back to the original series and maybe even to the prequels. Now, let's just put the original series in context with the prequels, and then there's all this other stuff too. There's like cartoons and shows, and it's got Baby Yoda. You got all. It's just Star Wars everywhere. There's breakfast cereals, right? There's everything you can imagine. And this kind of came from the beginning, where George Lucas had this idea of setting this Star Wars, this space opera, where he was going to kind of copy, or at least take ideas from films that he really enjoyed, samurai films and stuff like that, set it in an outer space sort of realm, have a basic sort of character arc, good versus evil, just a basic coming of age story. The original Star Wars trilogy is just right? It's just nice. It's not ham-fisted. The acting is decent. The storyline is great. It's simple. It's not all crammed together. The way that it unfolds, the way that it's filmed is beautiful for the most part. Even though it could appear somewhat dated, it's still it was well ahead of its time. I think anybody can say that in terms of special effects and stuff. And they still hold up really good today. And it's just a good story. And it's a great kids film. Right, it has all the elements for especially for young boys watching the films and stuff like that. The prequels were pretty much awful, and the terrible sort of mistakes that were made by George Lucas and co. dealing with the prequels, trying to set up the whole story. I mean, it was kind of nonsensical in a way. It would have been nice if they. I think the third. Episode 3, I guess you would call it, is the only one that I could possibly watch these days and somewhat enjoy because of Palpatine and some of the other scenes in it. There's big lightsaber battles, Yoda, all that. But like the first two, Episode 1, Episode 2, The Phantom Menace, and I think it's called The Clone Wars, are just awful films. They're just terrible. But they're not even near as bad as the Disney ones. That's what's crazy about it. People now are going to go back and say, actually, those films are much better. And you can see, I imagine many people putting out, ranking the films from best to worst. And I imagine the last two, or the two most recent Disney Star Wars, are going to rank right at the bottom of most lists. Rightfully so. They're just terrible. You can almost forgive Lucas to a certain extent. I mean, in one way, I can almost respect that Lucas took so long before he actually, made some prequels. Of course, he made so much money. I mean, he was a billionaire off the Star Wars thing. And the smartest thing that Lucas ever did, maybe it was the dumbest thing because maybe it destroyed his creativity, was to embrace the marketing of toys with the Star Wars franchise, because that's really where all the money came from for the most part, dealing with the original trilogy. It was the toys. In fact, it's well known that the only reason that Han Solo was brought back for the Return of the Jedi was because he was the most popular character, and toys. Because you're going to sell X million, 10 million Han Solo, plastic little figurines for $5 a piece sort of thing. And if you kill them, then that's sales loss. So he kind of reluctantly came back and did the third one. So Star Wars has always been, I think maybe the first Star Wars, when the first Star Wars came out, and nobody really knew what to expect. I imagine that people that were involved in the film, maybe some people knew it was going to be a big hit, but for the most part, I think most of the actors, most of the people that took part in it weren't sure if it was going to just be a massive flop or if it was going to be, I don't think anybody predicted it would be as big as it was. And that's what makes that original film so pleasant to watch, because it's just a basic sort of storyline, the character arc, and the hero learning the ropes, starting off as just a farm boy, and then through the trilogy becoming eventually a Jedi Knight. Not like the Mary Sue. Is it the Mary Sue or the Mary Jane? I think it's the Mary Sue. Pardon me. I said Mary Jane before. Mary Jane being, marijuana kind of analogy. But Mary Sue, the Mary Sue. So if you don't know what a Mary Sue character is, a Mary Sue is somebody who can basically do anything instantly, is good at everything, and that's exactly what Rey is in the new Disney trilogy. And it's just bad from day one. Not that Daisy Ridley's awful or anything. I mean, she plays the role. She's convincing as her character. But the whole Disney sort of trilogy, which started off well, I think in the original The Feminist Awakens film, it had enough of mixing together the old with the new, where the prequels kind of lost the plot and introduced annoying characters like Jar Jar Binks and had the Roger robots and stuff like that. So when the original sort of, I remember seeing this in the theater and just seeing the Phantom Menace and just being like, like you're not, when you're going to watch a Star Wars film, it's like, that's the roller coaster ride. That's why you go to movies, right? That's one of the things that you go to a movie for, because you want to be taken out of your world and put into another one. You don't want to be there like saying, this kid is so annoying, this story, these characters have no depth, they're just cardboard cutouts. Liam Neeson is terrible, but you can't really blame him because his character has no real foundation or structure or anything about him. Ewan McGregor is kind of passable, but then again, there's some lightsaber battles, there's a Queen Naboo, there's a big fish guy that spits a lot. And it's just terrible. It's a terrible film. It really is. I mean, you had a pod race. You had all this exposition. You had all these things that weren't necessary. In fact, what Lucas should have done is just got rid of those, or never even made the first two films. Just made one prequel, make it a 3-hour epic sort of thing like he did with, say, Episode 3. Maybe have a short sort of beginning where you have the kid and the kid's only in the film for 10, 20 minutes, kind of like The Godfather sort of thing, showing how, his origins as a child and being in a slave family and stuff like that. That should have all just been condensed, and then you could have had the big sort of Emperor Palpatine rising up, becoming the Emperor, and the origins of Darth Vader, and it would have been fine. So anyways, we have the prequels, for better or for worse. And again, it's a big cash-in because the amount of toys and video games and, cartoons and everything else that comes with Star Wars it just makes money, right? Because people are dumb. Let's be honest. People are dumb, and people are going to watch these things because nostalgia is a big part of it. You know, you grow up as a kid. I grew up with Star Wars, so you know it's a big part of your childhood. If you grew up with, say, The Wizard of Oz or something like that, it's a big part of your childhood, right? It kind of imprints itself upon you as a child, and they know this, and they know that, well, we can keep them coming back for more. And this is much how your sort of pseudo culture works, your entertainment world works. I talk a lot about suspended childhood and the massive Disney programming of the masses that, you know, using suspended childhood to keep people coming back again and again and again, normalizing adults acting like infants, the cosplay, all these things. I talk about it all the time, so I'm not going to get deep into that when I'm talking about this film. But nonetheless, we need to discuss how terrible this film is and why people should definitely turn their back on Star Wars, period. And you know what? You can embrace and still love the original trilogy. I think it's good cinema, you know, like any way you slice it. I look at the original Star Wars as being something cinematic at the level of, say, The Wizard of Oz, right? It's something, it's a spectacle, and it's perfect in its time. You know, okay, it's a little bit dated in some ways, but you could still go back, you could still watch it. Kids can still watch it today and love it. I watch all kinds of classic horror films and sci-fis and stuff from the 30s, the 40s, even the 20s. I even watch silent films. I can still really appreciate them for what they give and what they have and what they were able to do at the time. I love a lot of the monster films, the Ray Harryhausen type films, even though the creatures compared to today's CGI look kind of dated and, you know, some people might giggle and stuff like that. You can still appreciate the amount of imagination that would go into making these films, sort of thing. And then in many ways, they're much more real and appreciable than, say, the CGI, which often doesn't have the same type of emotion behind it, and the actors interacting with the CGI are often, you know, I mean, that's one of the problems with the prequels and showing this, and a lot of people I'm sure know this, is that the prequels, most of the actors were doing everything with green screens everywhere. It was just green screens. So everything that they did was with a green screen. So they had to imagine it in their head what was going on. The whole thing was the antithesis of the original trilogy, because the prequels, instead of developing character, they just kind of had no idea what to do with the characters. So the characters had cheesy lines. They didn't really have anything that built them up as a character. Where you see in the original one, you see Luke starting off as that sort of, you know, naive farm boy who dreams of being a star pilot and stuff like that. And then you see him have to go through, you know, many steps to actually reach that level, sort of thing, and become something. So that's the proper arc that you'd want to see characters go through. With the prequels, you had the little boy who somehow, you know, just decided, well, he made C-3PO. And guess what? He can make the fastest pod racers and stuff like that. And it's like, no, a little 8-year-old boy can't do that stuff, and that's stupid. But they had to stretch it out and make 3 movies and make as much money as possible. And this is ultimately, when we talk about it, money is a big factor, obviously. Programming, the agendas of the New World Order are a huge factor in Star Wars. But money is always a big factor. So this is one of the things that you're going to get when you look at what makes something special. When you look at films, like, we could look at a lot of films throughout history and say, thank God they didn't make a bunch of sequels. You know? Thank God it was just one and done, sort of thing. Or maybe there was a remake at some point in time, and occasionally the remake can be an improvement, but generally remakes are terrible. But like, we look at a classic film. I'll give you an example. The Seven Samurai, for instance. Akira Kurosawa, which was heavily, you know, one of these films that heavily influenced George Lucas as well in coming up with Star Wars. I mean, The Hidden Fortress was apparently one of the big films that influenced him, and the characters in it. That's where he got C-3PO and R2-D2, the two kind of gayish peasants that were always, you know, slapping each other. Anyways, you look at a film like The Seven Samurai. It's such a classic film. It's so beautifully shot. It's so impeccably acted. The story is just amazing. The characters are incredible. You're just glued. I mean, I could watch this I could watch that movie any day and just be blown away by it. Always finding new things, to appreciate in the film, marveling at how incredible the film is. You can never top that film. It'll never be topped. But they didn't make an Eight Samurai. They didn't make, the Seven Samurai Part 2 or, Return. I don't know. Maybe they did. I know they made a bunch of Westerns and all that. But I'm saying Akira Kurosawa never came back and milked that for anything more. He did it and he left it. And that's the way an artist should be, really. Artists should not be governed by their wallet. So I would say that George Lucas was an artist up until Star Wars came out. And in many ways, it was a stroke of luck that he didn't direct the second film, The Empire Strikes Back, because he probably would have done it differently. And as it turns out, The Empire Strikes Back, which I think was Irvin Kershner or whatever, I'm not sure his name, but it turns out to be the most beloved of the entire franchise and easily the best film out of all 9, is it now? 9? I guess you want to include the Rogue Ones and the other ones. It would be more the horrible Solo one. So my point being is that why are films great? And if you look through the great films, even if you were to say Star Wars, the first Star Wars, The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, right? Raging Bull. I mean, you look at so many great films that are undeniably great films. You had tremendous amount of pressure on the director themselves, the person that's ultimately responsible for the presentation and the film itself. You had tremendous pressure on everybody involved. This is the same case, it seems to be, with almost every classic film. Let's forget about the last 20 years of what Hollywood has become. But let's go back and look at some of classic Hollywood films. Citizen Kane, another great example, where the people making the film, or at least Orson Welles in that case, was under tremendous pressure. And in fact, that film almost didn't survive. This is probably the same, and it is the same with a lot of great artworks, paintings, right, sculptors and stuff like this, where they were under tremendous pressure. And then there were times when artists were, accused of selling out, accused of becoming too popular and appeasing or trying to get as much money as possible. But generally, when we look at art, and yes, motion picture is very much an art form, we see that the pressure of having to produce something is what drives greatness. If you remove the pressure, if you remove the incentives of those involved, namely the director, often being the case, but, obviously Star Wars was much more than just Lucas. It was so much more than just Lucas. In fact, the editors might have actually saved Star Wars. Like Star Wars in many ways, and this has been well illustrated, you can search on YouTube. The original Star Wars in many ways was saved in the editing room, right? That a lot of decisions that were made, and you can see this, you can verify it yourself, because there was a lot of scenes that were cut out with Luke and his friends, and just scenes that would have really brought the film down. In the second film, there's scenes that were cut out as well. The Empire Strikes Back, there's one really comical scene featuring the Wampa or whatever, the ice creature, which would have been really silly, and thank God they cut that scene out. But my point being is that one of the reasons why the original Star Wars was so good was because there was so much pressure. And this is what we see with great films. With great films, you go back, The Godfather is an excellent example, where Francis Ford Coppola was under so much pressure from the studio, and he was every day, spending countless hours, hardly getting any sleep, constantly rewriting scenes, constantly, defending Al Pacino as being his guy to play Michael Corleone, all these stories. And I'm a big Godfather fan, and, especially the first two Godfathers, which I think are excellent films. That's why those films are so good. So you want to know why these films are so bad, is because all of that's gone. It's all gone. Star Wars is like Starbucks. It's like McDonald's. You've already got the lobsters in the pot, right? It's like Walmart. People are going to show up no matter what, right? This destroys creativity. This destroys the incentive for directors and writers and stuff to actually really have to work hard, because they're going to get paid no matter what. The film is going to make a huge amount of money no matter what. The people are going to show up, even if it's a complete dud. The Phantom Menace is a great example. The Last Jedi is another great example. And of course, this latest stinker. I mean, you could say the Clone Wars as well. Those are terrible films. I wouldn't hesitate to say the Phantom Menace, the Clone Wars, the Last Jedi, and this one here, the Rise of Skywalker, are terrible films. I would not hesitate to say this, and I would argue with anybody who wanted. I mean, I would argue it wouldn't be worth my time, but I would say those are all terrible films. I would say that Episode 3 is passable. It has some good elements, and that, that's the only one I'll ever watch when it comes to the Star Wars, the prequels. I would say that The Force, The Feminist Awakens, is, they got certain things right. They got the look right. They got the feel right. It seemed like they got the characters right, although they've destroyed the whole arc of all these characters in the subsequent films. But they had the look and the feel right. It seemed like they had the characters right. They really tapped into the nostalgia. And that's why that film is not terrible. I wouldn't say it's a great film, but it's, as far as the Star Wars film goes, it put a lot of hope into the fans of the Star Wars, all the people that are under mind control for the most part, and thinking that, wow, Disney now is going to put all their resources, they're going to put the best of the best, they're going to really produce something amazing, and this is where Star Wars needs to be. This will help us forget about the horrible prequels. This is a return to what Star Wars was supposed to be. You can't return to that. You can't return. You can never come back to what it was, because you've destroyed the elements that were necessary to keep the films great. So when you take away the pressure that you would put on writers and directors and actors and all these people to make something really special, when you don't have people like George Lucas or Francis Ford Coppola or Orson Welles losing tremendous amounts of sleep, Akira Kurosawa, the same thing, right? I know a lot about Akira Kurosawa as well, and he's gone through tremendously difficult times being a true artistic director, where he was under pressure from the studios, and and sometimes his films would bomb, even though they would be absolutely brilliant films, and that would throw him into a depression. This has happened to a lot of directors. So a lot of these directors that get hired, they have tremendous pressure on them. If they put out a flop, that could be it for their career, right? Even if it's a well-done film, and there's a lot of really good films that have been made, some even classics, that completely flopped at the box office. And some of these films actually destroyed the careers, or just, that was it for those people. I mean, right? Take it or leave it, for better or for worse. Maybe you're better outside of Hollywood. I imagine you are, for most part. Anyways, the point being that to make a diamond, you need pressure, right? So that is the basic concept that propels most of great filmmaking. Most of great filmmaking, and just like artistry, just like musicians, painters, right? Poets, it's a lot of times it's the pressure and the circumstance, and having to deal with that pressure that pushes you to do something great, that gives you that incentive to be something, right? To channel all your energy and to really, really focus it and put out a diamond, basically. And this is why Star Wars can never, ever return to what it was. People keep thinking that somehow they're going to it's a formula and you can just tap into it. And it's just, all you got to do is have enough cute droids and some woolly creatures and some cantina scenes and some Force people, and you have to get the lightsaber battles right, and you need to have Mos Eisley and the Millennium Falcon and whatever, right? And this is what these new films are. Like, the new films are, well, we gotta have the Ewoks. We gotta have the cute little droids. Let's throw another cute little droid, because guess how many, how much ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching toys we're gonna sell with a little even smaller version. Because you know what, a lot of parents probably can't afford the BB-8 droid toy, whatever thing for Christmas. So we'll sell them a little small one, a little smaller one, and then it's easier to make, it's easier to sell. We'll sell them like hotcakes. Kids will love it. Now, kids that watch these films, if you're a kid and you grow up with, say, the prequels, you're going to be more attached to the prequels. If you grow up with the Feminist Awakens, the Disney Star Wars, you're going to be more attached to these films. Little kids that go to these films are not going to have the clouded sort of judgment, you would say, of the adults and the people that have been around to see all the former films and the much better films. They're going to come in fresh. They're going to be dazzled by the light show. Now, how would a film that's so messy and incoherent as The Rise of Skywalker affect these kids? It's hard to know, really. Right? I can't get in the mind of a little kid watching the film, but there's enough eye candy and enough lightsabers and force things and creatures and stuff that it might keep a kid's interest. But I don't think it'll spellbind the kids like the original sort of Star Wars did. So I'm saying there's a massive drop off probably on the effect that it's having on children. Hopefully, right? Hopefully people are going to say enough Star Wars. Now, I said it before. I said there should be a complete moratorium on Star Wars. I think for 100 years, I don't want to hear anything about Star Wars ever again. I don't want to hear another Star Wars film, Star Wars, Baby Yoda, Mandalorian. I don't want to hear about Star Wars this, Star Wars that. I don't want to hear about it ever again. I think the world is absolutely exhausted from Star Wars. I think Star Wars is anything but what it used to be, right? The new Star Wars, the Disney Star Wars, is just awful. It's just awful. Let's just say it's awful. And it is a perversion of what the original series was. If the original one, if you just left it, if you did that trilogy, you ended on the Return of the Jedi, that was it. It would have been great. And then but this is the way that this New World Order works these days, right? It's not enough. They can't leave it alone. Harry Potter's the exact same thing. It never ends. It spawns more sequels and offshoots. And Game of Thrones, another great example, right? It's never going to end because people had such a craving for it that they're like, well, these are lobsters in the pot. All we have to do is whip up another show or another cartoon or whatever and stick Game of Thrones on it, and people will show up. And they're right, because people are dumb. So this is where we're at with the latest film here. The latest film here, The Rise of Skywalker, is just a terror. It's almost an anti-film. It's almost like it's the opposite of what film should be. You would think on a film set, the amount of people, all these people coming together and all this creativity coming out, right? That people are spending significant amounts of time, whether you're part of the set, the crew, the makeup, the design, the clothing, and then the actors, right? I mean, there's just so many people involved. But this is where we get, when we look at another example, when we talk about, say, Peter Jackson. So Peter Jackson, who once upon a time was a pretty artistic director. I mean, if you've seen films like Dead Alive, for instance, right? Some of his early stuff, it's quite brilliant. I mean, he definitely had a skill, and yet he was like, a budget sort of director, making, horrors and slapstick horror comedies and stuff like that. Then he got his chance with Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings, he had the pressure. I mean, there's a tremendous pressure. You're getting Lord of the Rings. It's one of the biggest fantasy series of all time. It's beloved by millions. It's a huge, huge deal. And he got the films, and he obviously had a tremendous amount of pressure under him to perform and to appease a lot of different people. He had to appease the people that read the novels. He had to appease the studio, right? He had to do all these different things. Obviously, it's not a one-man thing, but I'm just saying you could see why the original Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson, I know it's not the original, but forget about the Bashki sort of animated version, but the original Lord of the Rings stands up to this day. because they did so many things well, and that's because there was a lot of pressure. It could have easily bombed, right? In many ways, the studios interfering with the project almost side railed it, and until they had the right sort of conditions and they did it properly, where they did 3 books. They did the 3 books, even though they mixed things around and they mixed the order, and they took out a lot of things and added other things and characters and stuff like that. For the most part, the Lord of the Rings trilogy works really well, right? And for many people, it's another classic sort of cinema. I don't know if it's up there with Star Wars and Wizard of Oz, but yeah, maybe. I would say, yeah, that's what I think of when I think of those films. It's like just good cinema. That's why you go to the movies, right? You want to see, characters and the story arcs and people, overcoming odds, people coming together, fighting, in seemingly unsurmountable odds and overcoming these situations, the obstacles that are put in front of them, coming together as a team and winning in the end, sort of thing. And that's Star Wars. This is the exact same thing. You say Wizard of Oz is the same thing. You could say, right, Lord of the Rings. Then you compare and contrast that to the Hobbit by Peter Jackson, and you think, well, the Hobbit, well, it's right. I mean, it's a children's book, and it's pretty simple. It's like something you could read in an afternoon, pretty much. And how could you mess that up? I mean, you got Peter Jackson. He did such a great job with Lord of the Rings. But then you get the studio coming in, and the studio saying, we want to turn this into another Lord of the Rings. And then you take a short sort of novel for children that would easily fit into a 2-hour film, and you stretch it out into whatever 8-9 hours saga. And The Hobbit is actually quite terrible. It's one of those films films, there's 3 of them, right? But I can't watch it. I just find it just awful. Like, I just find that the whole magic of what Lord of the Rings was is lost because there's so much exposition, there's so much filler put in. There's so much that doesn't need to be there. Less is more. The pressure is gone from Peter Jackson. Now he's a multi-millionaire. Now the studio's giving him lots of money. The studio's saying, hey, it's okay, here, you need this, you need, it's going to go over budget. Don't worry. We believe in you. You're going to give us another hit. And what happens in the end is he lays a giant stinker. And all 3 Hobbit films are just terrible, in my opinion. I mean, there's some good moments in them. There's always going to be some things. I mean, they spend so much money on these things. You could say the thing about the Disney Star Wars. I mean, there are some good action scenes, lightsaber battles, things like that are a spectacle to behold on screen, but it's everything else that doesn't hold it together. The new Star Wars, just the whole story, the whole plot, the character arcs don't make any sense. They're just there's a whole bunch of dead ends, and there's a whole bunch of things that aren't explained at all. And when we go back to, say, dealing with this, The Rise of Skywalker, as compared to, say, the previous film, which everyone also seemed to hate. I don't think everyone hates it. I think it has a fan base or whatever. And then you think that story was more simple, and that's why it's a better film in many ways, because it's a very simple story. The part where they go off to the gambling world is, a half hour worth of just garbage, and the whole thing should be cut from the film. It's just terrible. But if you just had the slow sort of chase, right, you have a much more simple, structured story. And that's why that film is better, even though it's a terrible film. Even though, without question, I don't like the film at all. And there's some good scenes in the film. There's some good battles and explosions and fighter ships and whatever. That's what Star Wars is going to give you, right? They know that you want that. You're going to get that no matter what. But for the reality of the film, or the most part of the film, it's a terrible film. This one's much worse, which is hard to believe. And you think with the Rian Johnson character, who allegedly pissed off so many people because of his decisions, what he did with his characters, what he did with Luke Skywalker, for instance, right? Having him die off in some fake sort of fight with Kylo Ren pissed off so many people. Having Luke drink was it blue milk or whatever, green milk? I can't remember. It was so disgusting from those sea cows, there's so many things about the film that you think, and you just, oh, why did they put that in? Why are they doing this? Yoda all of a sudden becomes the little goblin Yoda from the early part of Empire Strikes Back, and wants to burn the Jedi books. Like, it doesn't make any sense, of course. And you build up this lore for so long, and then you ridicule it, and then like Luke Skywalker throwing the lightsaber away when he's given to him by Ren. It's just, a lot of people are like, why did they do that? And so this third film tries to correct a lot of these things. And of course, by trying to correct a lot of the things that piss people off in The Last Jedi, they made things much worse, because now it becomes inexplicable. So now, like, another thing that people were really pissed off with in the second film was the all of a sudden sudden death of Snoke, right? And who the hell was Snoke? And they kind of built up this character, and he was mean and menacing. He looked super powerful for the short time that he was in The Last Jedi, and then they just kill him off. And it's like, well, this is supposed to be the most powerful Sith Lord or whatever. I don't know if he was technically a Sith or whatever he was, but he was supposed to be the main villain of this new trilogy, and then you just kill him off halfway through the second film. And it's like, well, where do you go from here? And I guess the idea maybe was that Kylo Ren was going to take over and be the main bad guy sort of thing. But then again, probably what happens, Disney messes up. So many people complain, and then Disney says, well, what do people like? People love Palpatine, right? They love Palpatine. Let's just bring back Palpatine. That solves a lot of our problems. So we'll bring back Palpatine. Of course, it doesn't work at all, because it doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense. Why is Palpatine back? And then how is he resurrected? And the whole thing is so half-baked. It's so terrible the way that it's explained. It doesn't make any sense. And everybody's going to be feeling that. Even the kids that are watching, I'm sure, are just like, I thought Palpatine was dead. I mean, why is he back? Well, he's back because he's a very popular villain. And they know that putting Palpatine back in the film is going to put a lot more butts back in the cinemas, right? A lot more people are going to pay. So you have this new one. It's set after the Battle of Crate, and then you have Kylo Ren discovering that he finds some device that he has to go to this planet called Exegol, and then he discovers Palpatine, right? And then Palpatine reveals to him that he created Snoke as a puppet. I mean, it's just so dumb. It's just, okay. And when I say, like, I honestly come in and I think, I thought a lot of the I'm like this. I do conspiracy stuff all the time. I think a lot of the controversy is actually meant to be there, sort of thing, that Disney was doing a lot of these things on purpose. But then when you see this third film, you're just like, no, actually, they're actually making it up as they go along. It's clear that they had no real sort of vision of what they were going to do with the whole trilogy. Like, the first one came out with the heavy feminist themes and the Mary Sue character of Rey, but it was a strong start. Most people thought, yeah, it looks like Star Wars is back. They got the look, the feel, all these things right. The characters, all of a sudden you had Rey and Finn, and you had Finn as being the stormtrooper who all of a sudden has enough of being a stormtrooper and breaks his programming and joins the resistance, the rainbow diverse resistance, of course. And these are some of the themes that we'll discuss in a little bit here, dealing with the New World Order elements of Star Wars. But, the first film started off on the right foot. The second one, it's like, so you start off, you're crawling, you get up, you start walking, and then you start running, right? This is analogy of the first Star Wars film. And it's like, well, they set this up nice, looks like it's going to be a good series. Looks like the old Star Wars style is back. They figured out that, yeah, it's really important to get characters down and build a story and have an arc and all these things. And then the second one, it's like you're running top speed and you just hit a rock and you trip and you fall face first. Like, and that's kind of what happened in the second one. And then the third one, it's like, well, how do we fix that mistake? How do we fix all the mistakes, all the problems that we made in the third one? I know, we'll make a whole bunch of horrible exposition. We'll have umpteen different planets that have nothing memorable about them. We'll have our characters on a wild goose chase trying to track down these items so that they can find out where Palpatine has his massive, Starfleet. I mean, he's built this gigantic Starfleet somewhere in the galaxy. I don't know how he built it. None of it makes sense. None of it's explained. I mean, it's just there. It's like it's magic. He just whips it up. He's got thousands of those star destroyers, and each one of the star destroyers has this big penis thing that can shoot and blow up. So they kind of make the Death Star irrelevant now, because now the regular sort of Star Destroyer, we're not even talking the Darth Vader frickin' super Star Destroyer type, but just the regular triangle Star Destroyer now has the ability to destroy a planet just like that. And it's like, yeah, a ship that big is going to blow up a whole planet. I don't know, but none of it makes sense. It doesn't have to make sense. This is the whole thing. It's not science fiction. You could say sci-fi. Hey, sci-fi. It's not science fiction. There's no science involved in Star Wars. I mean, you got horses, people on horse-like creatures charging down the top of a Star Destroyer. I mean, it's just none of it makes sense. And they're in the middle of this giant ocean with these 300-foot or 3,000-foot waves or whatever. Like, nothing makes sense. Nothing's explained. Nothing fits. Who are these people? Now you've got this black chick that's leading this group of horse-like creatures. Like, none of it makes. They're just thrown in. There's all of a sudden there's these characters. All of a sudden they're just throwing in these things, and this is the whole thing. The whole movie from the very starting point makes no sense. It makes no sense, and that's the way it starts. It starts off, and it's like, okay, we're gonna just cram all this crap together, and we're going to talk about how Palpatine has come back all of a sudden, and that Kylo Ren is determined to kill him. Right? He's determined. He's like, I don't buy the story. I mean, even Kylo Ren doesn't buy the story or doesn't buy it, and he wants to just find Palpatine and kill him, basically, because he's like, what the hell? This is garbage. Anyway, so yeah, you have and again, spoilers. I mean, screw you. Seriously, spoilers. I mean, it's a terrible film. There's your spoiler. What? I just saved you money. And yeah, you're asking me, oh yeah, Jeff, you went to pay to see that film? Hell no, I didn't pay to see that stupid film. There's no way I would give Disney any of my money. Zilch. Zero. I got it for free, okay? And I'm proud of it. And you know what? It was a waste of my time. You could say maybe this is a waste of your time too, Jeff, to do a whole review on how terrible this film is. And I can say, yeah, probably. But at least there I can come in and maybe, just maybe, YouTube algorithms don't bury me beneath a sea of idiots. And that maybe just people could come in, normal people, I mean, wouldn't that be a miracle? Would find my channel and say, oh, I'm going to sub this dude because he's talking about how terrible Star Wars is, and I kind of like what he's saying, and I kind of dig what he's saying. And guess what? Then, you've got normie people that are listening to Jeff C., which would be the reason why I'm doing this. And because the film is terrible, and I want people to know that, why it's terrible. So anyways, yeah, you got Palpatine. He reveals he's got a secret armada of Star Destroyers. Thousands of them, it seems. An unlimited supply. It just came out of nowhere. And then he's telling Kylo he's got to go and kill Rey because, didn't that what Snoke said too? I mean, what's going on here? You got to kill Rey. But he doesn't really want to kill Rey. It's like he wants her to kill Rey, but then in the end it's like, I never wanted him to kill you, and it's like, well, none of it makes sense. It's just retarded. I'm sorry, J.J. Abrams is an idiot. He's a terrible person. Why? Explain this to me. Why does Adam Sandler Why is he not in prison? Why do people pay to see Adam Sandler movies? Why does Adam Sandler ever get to make more movies? Like, he's made so many terrible movies. Why do people keep going back? I mean, I know why. You're not allowed to say why, right? You can't talk about that. But, I mean, these things, it's like these people are just, they're so inept. They're so terrible at what they do. A 5-year-old child could have written a better plot than what they did in this. I could have done better, 5 minutes sitting on the toilet scribbling, I could definitely have come up with a better plot, no doubt. I mean, I don't know, how does this pass? How does any of it, like, yeah, that seems okay? It's like the original, or the prequels, right? Where you had, that famous scene, which the Harry Plinkett guys there, Red Letter Media, showed and mocked incessantly, which was, George Lucas sitting watching the first screening of the Phantom Menace, and then the lights go on and they're all sitting there and everyone's got like this face of just deflation, and he's like, I think I might have gone too far, It's like, yeah, you made a terrible movie, dude. You made a terrible movie. And that's the reality. George Lucas can never make a good movie. He can't make good movies because it's all about money. You lose that drive. If you're going to be an artist, be an artist. It shouldn't matter. That's why it's like, I mean, George Lucas made more money than you could possibly imagine off the original Star Wars. He was set for 100 lifetimes. I mean, he was one of the richest guys in America based on the making the original trilogy of Star Wars. So he could have done whatever. He could have said, you know what? I don't give a damn. I don't need any more money ever again, and I can make any movie I want to make. And I don't care about how it comes out. I don't care about if it makes money. I don't care about anything because I'm super rich. Look at me. I don't even have a neck anymore. I have a, I mean, like, he didn't need any more money. He never needed another cent. And yet he went and basically sold out, made the prequels, and made them as bad and as many, and spread them out, and had all the fanfare and toys and everything to go with it because he wanted more money. That's all. Let's be honest. It's more money. It certainly wasn't about the vision. So, when you think, and this is why I try to explain where greatness comes from. You cannot manufacture greatness. You can't do it. You can't do it. Not artistically, not creatively, in a creative way. Creatively is what I went to say. You can't manufacture that. You can't just put all these assets on this and it'll come out well. It's just like saying, if we throw enough CGI on the screen, if we get enough of the best CGI artists, it'll make our monsters look so good that, I mean, that's the reality. Where does greatness come from? The pressure, right? The pressure of having to produce something, or the freedom of being artistically creative. The freedom of just saying, I'm going to make whatever I want to make. And I don't give a damn about the studio. In fact, I'm going to go 180 from the studio. I'm going to do exactly what they don't want me to do. I'm going to focus on story and this and that and just develop it and do it exactly the way that I feel it should be, right? The reality is just going back and trying to make the prequels was a mistake. And we're living mistake after mistake after mistake. We're in a post-Star Wars world where about 50% of all media in this day and age right now is Star Wars, right at this time. It's just nuts. It's nuts. It's not beneficial to anyone except the scumbags, Disney, who are taking over everything, right? Everything. I mean, Disney is one of the most powerful corporations in the world. When it comes to your media, I mean, almost everything you're watching the Marvel movies, the DC movies, you're watching, I mean, it's all the same beast that controls it. You're watching National Geographic. Well, congratulations, you're watching Disney. Half the YouTube channels you're probably going to watch if you're subscribed to the popular YouTube channels are Disney, or are Disney shills or affiliates or whatever. Mickey Mouse Club, former people. I mean, Disney's just evil. It's awful. And Disney wants to control all of our entertainment, basically. And that's why they take one of the most beloved franchises of all time, Star Wars, and they infuse it with all their New World Order agendas. This is why you have this resistance of all these diverse species, and then you have the you have the what are they called? The General Hux there. I'm trying to think of there's the resistance and there's the First Order. And now you have the Last Order in this film, right? But the First Order, what are the First Order? Well, they're for the most part they're white, right? Especially at the upper the upper levels of governance and military. It's a military dictatorship, basically, right? With fanatical white people running the whole thing. And they have no tolerance for diversity. All they want, it seems, all they want to do is create some sort of military, hegemony, right? They want to control the galaxy, basically, right? And, similar to the original Star Wars, and you say the original Star Wars, George Lucas was heavily influenced. One of the films that he was heavily influenced was the Dam Busters, right? It was a lot of the villains in the original Star Wars, Peter Cushing, for instance, right? Many of the characters were their dress and their dialogue was structured around Nazi Germany, sort of thing, without being blatantly German, sort of thing. They were an offshoot, or they were a representation of Nazi Germany, right? And that's what they used for the original film. Now they've kind of rebooted that for this Disney sort of this Disney thing, right? So you have all these elements coming together, and who are the good guys? Well, the good guys are the ones that are open to diversity and have all these funny-looking creatures. So, like, you don't see that with the First Order, right? You go in the First Order, and it's all humans, basically, right? There's not all these different species that are represented. This is important to point out. People need to know this, because what is Disney, right? Who runs Disney? You're not allowed to talk about the people that run Disney, okay? You want to find out who controls you, find out who you're not allowed to talk about, right? That's the reality. So you're wondering why. What does the First Order represent? They have the black sun sort of symbolism. Again, the Nazi sort of, it's again an analogy of the Nazi regime. You have the General Hux character, who's just this raving sort of, douchebag sort of thing. He's an easy character for people to laugh and ridicule. He's almost useless in this film too. They have him and he basically betrays Kylo Ren because I guess he's jealous or something that Kylo Ren is in charge, and he's no longer because Snoke is gone. He's now like third or fourth in command or whatever. So, but the reason why I point that out is because the themes. What do they want? Open borders, right? This is much of what you see with the Resistance. All the different creatures. Look at the who's the chubby little Asian girl that was in the second film there. One of the worst characters in all of Star Wars. Easily. Worse than Jar Jar. I'd say the chubby little Asian girl and the purple-haired, whatever she was. Watch my language here. The purple-haired Laura Dern character. Those are two of the worst characters, obviously, in the history of Star Wars, right? And why are these characters here? What do they represent? Well, again, the feminism. You've got the New World Order, the diversity, right? So all these things coming together. We've all got to come together, and we all got to share together. This is with the Kalergi plan, with the New World Order, the open borders. They're diluting the sort of European white cultures that existed for hundreds, thousands of years, sort of thing. And they're forcing all these migrants from Muslim countries and all these other places into. So this is a huge amount of your programming. It's the same on Sesame Street. It's the same thing with the Muppets. It's the same thing with a lot of your programming that can be more subtle in the way that they do it sometimes, although these days they're just bashing you on the head with it. But that's exactly what the Resistance represents. So it's a cardboard cutout sort of thing where you've got the one-dimensional sort of Nazi, fascist dictatorship of the First Order, and then you have the we love everyone, open diversity, feminism, open borders, all creatures great and small, garbage of the Resistance. And this is the left-right paradigm that you exist in as well. And so the films are heavily programming. I mean, they really want to get the youth with this type of programming. They want you to embrace this because it's all globalism. Why are they doing this? Because if you're somebody that doesn't listen to me, it's the banksters who run the world, the most powerful banks, the most powerful corporations, the most powerful families, the aristocracies, right? They run the world, and they've run the world for a long time. And they want to create a new world order. This is all around you. It's happening every day. And everything's becoming globalized. And this is why you have creatures like Greta Thunberg as your sort of leading the flocks of people, right? This is all controlled by people behind the scene, the wizards behind the curtain sort of thing that nobody really is paying attention to. And everybody's pointing fingers at the left and the right and, the divide and conquer. But we are all being subjugated to a new world order in which they are going to severely depopulate the planet, and they are already unveiling a massive surveillance system. Transhumanism, of course, they're pushing the LGBTQ XYZ because they want people to stop having babies. They're deconstructing the family nucleus. This is all around us, and this is why I talk about it in Star Wars. Star Wars over and over again. And you can go to the original series, and you could say, well, maybe George Lucas wasn't totally on board, or maybe he was, who knows, really. But it's this deconstruction of the family is a huge part. That's why I showed this when I talked about the Feminist Awakens, and then The Last Jedi as well. And you have Kylo Ren killing Han Solo, and it just constant patricide, matricide sort of happening in the films. And again, it happens in this film when you find out that Rey is actually a Palpatine. There you go. Big spoiler. Rey is actually a Palpatine, which is, it's so dumb the way it's explained. It doesn't make any sense, of course. None of it makes sense, but it fits the narratives of what they're trying to do. So anyways, let's get back to the plot here. So you've got the clan of the Rey, Finn, Poe, Chewbacca, all these characters coming together, and they've got to find some Sith artifact or something. Just triangle thing, right? Whatever. And then they go and they leave and they go to some planet because somebody knew somebody that knew somebody there. And then when they're on this planet, they find Lando Calrissian, who then takes them and leads them to the location of the last known location of the artifact, somewhere in the desert. And they get swallowed up by some quicksand or something, which conveniently just drops them down into some freaking cavern in which they find the exact thing that they're looking for. It's just so convenient, isn't it? And this is all happening really fast, and there's some stupid scenes with flying stormtroopers and all this crap. And then you've got Rey, who decides to walk out in the desert. I should have mentioned that this seemed like it's Tatooine or whatever. They're always on these desert planets. I don't know which desert planet. I don't give a damn anyways. But she just decides to leave the group of the happy-go-lucky multicultural friends and, go walking right out into the desert. It's something you do, I guess. She goes out in the desert, and then that's when Kylo Ren, you've seen that scene probably from the prequels, Kylo Ren comes in with his super frickin' TIE fighter or whatever, which has terrible blind spots, but never mind. And he just flies in, and of course she does the thing where she runs with her lightsaber and then does this acrobatic flip in the air and then slices off the wing of the TIE fighter. And I mean, they keep meeting up too, and then they're fighting at points, but they're at different locations. Like she's on a starship and he's down on the ground in some slimy town. And yet they're going through the Force, they're interacting with each other, and they're fighting. They're having a lightsaber fight, but they're in two different places. I mean, everything's been thrown out the window since the midi-chlorians and all that crap came in the prequels. I mean, it's just, they make it up as they're going along. I mean, so anyways, but Poe, whatever, says they got to go to some other place to get some Sith text, and then they have to use C-3PO's got it in his memory, but he can't reveal it, so they got to take him to some place, some canteen place where you can stick a lot more little creatures. You sell a lot more of those little toys in, and one of the little creatures is going to be able to dig out the information that's in C-3PO's brain or something. And then you have Kylo searching for Ren, and that's when they have the fight. And I mean, all this happens so quickly too. It's just like, where are they now? What are they going? Right? And then through the, using the Force, Kylo, when they're having their fight, he's, they're always talking, and it's almost like they're siblings, but they're not, because in the end they're kind of like lovers, whatever. But it doesn't really amount to anything because Kylo dies and gives his life force to her. But they're always squabbling against each other. I mean, it's like the scene in the Last Jedi where he's got his shirt off. She's like, "Put your shirt on. Why put that in the film, right? Why do you put this stuff in? Oh, because it's all part of your programming anyway." So he tells her that she's Palpatine's granddaughter, basically, right? Which, I mean, everyone's like, "Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Makes total sense, right? Yeah, Palpatine had a granddaughter and just ditched her on some Tatooine-like planet, right? So she could scavenge for instant oatmeal things." I mean, just go back. You go back through the whole thing. None of it makes sense, of course. So anyways, Palpatine, he tells her that Palpatine, ordered her death or something, because he feared her power. And then, Rey then, I don't know, she escapes or something. Anyways, General Hux finds the group on the starship. But because he's pissed at Kylo, he says, I'm the spy or something. And that's the whole thing with General Hux, right? It's just... like these characters, they go nowhere. It's like, okay, that's it for you. Remember the Captain Phasma character? I mean, what was the point of that character? I know, sell toys. Yeah, that's it. Good answer. That's what it is. Sell toys, sell video games, sell toys, sell cartoons. Because then you can have all the other crap that they make, the little cartoons and the Clone War things and the spin-off shows, and they can deal with all of that. So they want you to be an ultra Star Wars nerd. This is the whole thing, though. Maybe if you're an ultra Star Wars nerd and you're watching every little thing that comes out, it makes sense. Maybe you're putting it together. Oh yeah, that was in this thing, and Star Wars Rebels had that scene, and I remember in the Clone Wars they had this, and in the video game they had that, right? And then you have these channels on YouTube that are, to me, obviously Disney employees. Like they have the guy there, Star Wars Theory, who allegedly makes or remakes scenes and stuff like that. They have a bunch of these characters on YouTube that they have reacting to the trailers and stuff like that. And they come in and they explain all this crap. Because, why would you explain it in a film? I'm not a fan of films that have to bend over and tell you everything. In fact, I prefer things to be mysteries. And I think, with the original Star Wars, there was a lot of things weren't explained. You don't know who Darth Vader was in the first film. You didn't know who these characters were. You didn't know who Luke's parents were. You didn't know all these things. And then over time, you learn them, sort of thing. And the mystery was all part of it. But it was very simple. It wasn't convoluted. It wasn't all just, constant rehash or, oh, we messed this up, so now we gotta completely redo this plot line, and that one went nowhere, so people were pissed off, so now we're gonna do it this way. Good Lord. It's so, if it sounds terrible from what I'm explaining, I want you to imagine it being 100 times worse than what I'm saying, because that's how bad it is. I want everyone that listens to this never to give Disney another cent. Not 1 cent. If you can, I don't know, pickpocket. If you sneak into Disney, steal a bunch of things. I don't know. I'm just joking, of course. But never give them anything. Anything. Don't give them any of your money. Don't pay for any of their crap ever. Right? If you're going to watch this shit, just stream it. Don't ever give them any money. Don't give them anything. So anyways, they escaped the Falcon, and then General Hux is executed because they found the spy, even though he didn't reveal himself as the spy. They just shoot him on the spot, and that's it for him. And then they use the Star Destroyer to just blow up some planet. As I said, the Star Destroyer has this penis that comes down and just shoots some planet. And that's it. It blows up the planet. I was looking at it. I was like, what's it going to do? Maybe it's going to blow up a city or something. But no, it blows up the whole planet. It's like a little Star Destroyer is going to be able to... How much energy... none of it makes sense. Like, why... What's the point of the Death Stars if you could build that on a Star Destroyer? And then, of course, you're told that all those thousands of Star Destroyers that the resurrected Palpatine magically created out of thin air, I guess, all have these things on them, so they can all blow up every planet that the Resistance is located on, I guess. Right? I mean, could you imagine how awful... I mean, who approves this? If you just look at J.J. Abrams, you just take a good look at him. You look at Kathleen Kennedy. You look at these people that they have so much money, and these are the people that are writing this stuff. And it's like these people, there's no fear of them losing their jobs. There's no fear that they might go hungry. They may not be able to feed their families. There's no pressure on them that, oh, this film might bomb and people might hate it. There's no pressure whatsoever. That's why these films are awful. Because it's the antithesis of art. I mean, if you think that Star Wars, I mean, the original Star Wars, you could say, yeah, that maybe could pass as art, right? But these films are the antithesis of art. They are the opposite of what art is. They are corporate products. They're as real as your action figures, right? Their main purpose is to sell toys and to program the masses into their agendas. That's what it is. They're going to make money no matter what. There's no pressure on... What is J.J. Abrams' pressure? What kind of pressure does he have, right? I mean, he's got gazillions of dollars. There's no pressure on him to make something really good. It's all lobsters in the pot. People are going to line up to watch this stuff because people are under mind control. Disney mind control, to be exact. So anyways, they follow the coordinates that they get from the C-3PO, I guess, who loses his memory, and there's some slapstick in that. And then they find Palpatine's location, and is it Endor? I don't know. It's like, I don't think it's Endor, but it's where the second Death Star blew up, because you know how it is, right? They always got to keep bringing back the old stuff to, get the people in the, oh wow, it's got the old Death Star. I can't wait to see. Oh, there's going to be this epic battle in the water with these giant waves, and Rey and Kylo are going to battle it out, and the Death Star, and the Emperor's back. It's the same old crap, right? With Star Wars, just keep bringing back the things that people love. They did this with the Rogue One, Rogue One, yeah, whatever. I mean, people are like, oh, it's real Star Wars and all this, but it's kind of dumb, right? The whole plot is convoluted. Doesn't really make sense. It's like, don't you know how to download things? You have to, it's like, the whole thing in the Rogue One depends upon getting the information. Many Bothans died for the information to blow up the Death Star, right? Or the original Death Star. But it's like, I mean, how much information did you really need? I mean, there's a little 2-meter wide hole at the bottom of a trench that you got to dump some rockets in, but somehow you need to get the whole massive thing downloaded, and you have to have all these battles, and you have to have people transmitting the information from here to there, to this disc, to that disc, and then finally, onto the ship, and then Darth Vader's killing all these people, and somebody gets it through the door at the last second before Darth Vader chops them up, and they get away, and then, and he could say, well, it's fun, it's whatever, it's dumb. Yeah, it's dumb. But at least it was fairly simple, the story in Rogue One. I mean, Rogue One is infinitely better than this film, but it's still a dumb film. I mean, the only thing that makes Rogue One worth watching is it's very Star Wars-y-ish. It looks a lot like the original Star Wars, right? And they got the Death Star. Wow, don't you want to see the Death Star again? And there's some space battles, and, there's who was in there? I can't remember. There's some characters and stuff that they bring back. Anyways, I'm digressing. But yeah, so they got to go to the remains of the Death Star that I think is on some other planet. I don't think it's Endor. It's like, it's near Endor, but it's like, didn't the Death Star blow up on the moon of Endor? Wouldn't, if the remains came down from space, wouldn't they land on Endor? But maybe they land on, I don't know. It doesn't matter, right? You just make it up as you go along. So they got these dramatic settings where they've got, the outline or some of the remains of the Death Star, including the giant, orifice where the laser comes through, and you can kind of make it out, sort of thing. And so the little piece of jewelry or something that, it's kind of like the Goonies scene where they're looking through and they're able to find where, if you remember Goonies, right? The kids, and they have some sort of medallion or something, and they hold it up and they look and they see the rocks and they see where it lines up, and then they see where One-Eyed Willie's sort of treasure thing is. It's the same thing where she's like looking through and she's like, oh, okay, that's where we gotta go. And it's the tower where Palpatine and Luke fought Vader in Return of the Jedi, and and then they revoke because she gets over there. She goes over the 1,000-foot waves and does her Mary Sue thing. She's all of a sudden an expert, sailor. You know how it works, right? With Rey, and then she's in there and she goes up, and as she's looking, it's they have the soundtrack of the original Star Wars and Return of the Jedi in the background, and they have some of the grumblings of Palpatine, and they're revoking the memories of the battle that Luke and Darth fought. So dumb. It's so dumb. And then, so it was the dagger. I was trying to remember what it was that she was using, but it was a dagger, that she looked, and it had some holes in it, and the holes lined up with who the frickin' makes up this stuff? It's so dumb. Look at J.J. Abrams. Look at his nose. I don't know. You can't say that kind of stuff. Anyways, Kylo comes as well, I guess. He's always angry. He's always flying around, and he's flying really fast. And he shows up there, and then they fight they have that big fight on the thing with the big waves. And it's like they're fighting throughout the film, and nothing ever happens. They're fighting and they're bickering and they're talking, and it's like as I said, it's like a brother and sister. They freaking hate each other, but there's some some pent up rage that's between them, but they still love each other, kind of thing, or whatever. I don't even know. And then anyways, so then Leia dies, I think. Oh yeah, Leia shows up because I remember this now. I'm trying to remember what happened. So Leia, Kylo wins the lightsaber battle on the remains of the Death Star with the giant 1,000-foot waves and all that crap, and he strikes her down, and he's oh, thank God, somebody beat the Mary Sue. Oh my God, this is terrible. And then he's about to, I guess, maybe finish off Rey, although he doesn't really want to kill her. And then Leia appears and says something. I don't know what she says. Ben. Ben. Whatever, right? And then he hesitates, and then I think Rey somehow uses the Force to grab his lightsaber and stab him. And, is killing, basically kills him, but then brings him back to life, I guess. I mean, she kills him with the lightsaber, but then she uses her Force to heal the wound. Yeah. So she heals him, and then she goes to find Palpatine. Luke appears. There's this scene, the scene in Return of the Jedi where it's Luke is with Ben, and they're hanging out in Dagobah or whatever. There's a scene like that where it's Luke he's all bearded and he's got his whole robes on and he's hanging out with Rey, giving her some fatherly advice or something. I don't know. It's stupid. So then she goes to Exegol to find the or she goes to find Palpatine, right? And Rey has some interaction with Han Solo, who's now a Force ghost. Yeah, Han Solo, Force ghost. What? Isn't he a smuggler? A nerf herder? I mean, what? He's a Force ghost now? But he loves his son. It's okay, Ben. You're always a good guy. Even though you stabbed me, it's all right. It's all good. I'm a Force ghost now. We can hang out and have barbecues. I can't eat anything, but I'll hang out with you. We'll hang out with the Ewoks sort of thing. With Anakin, Ben, Yoda, all the Force ghosts. Force ghost. It's so dumb. Anyway, so yeah, Ben, he says you're Ben. You're Ben. Don't say you're not. Kylo's dead. Ben is alive. Ben is good. Ben. Okay, so anyways, Rey goes to see Palpatine, and he's in some bizarre place. It's just so bizarre. It's like this massive temple, and I don't know what all these hooded creatures are, or are they clones of Palpatine? You can't really tell. I had a shitty screen, whatever stream or whatever. It wasn't always clear, but did it need to be? I mean, it's just so dumb. So anyway, she confronts Palpatine, and then he says to her this, like, get this, he's like, you must strike me down, and then you'll strike me down, and then because you'll strike me down, my spirit will enter you and take over you, right? Makes sense, right? You strike them down. So, and it rehashes the Return of the Jedi. So the Return of the Jedi, what happens? Strike me down, Yes, give in to your anger, strike me down sort of thing. And then when Luke tries to do it because he's watching the battle, and the battle's the space battle, right? Lando Calrissian and co, Wedge and all those guys are caught. It's a trap, right? Yeah, Admiral Akbar. They're caught in a trap, and Luke sees that, and he sees the situation, and it's like a hopeless situation because he's watching the rebels get their ass kicked, basically. It's just a matter of time before they're all wiped out. And he's stuck there, and his dad is brooding over him. And, Palpatine is like, use that anger, channel, strike me down, and then become what you were destined to be, sort of thing. And then he eventually tries to strike him, and Darth, of course, stops him, his dad. And they duke it out, and they battle. So they kind of rehash that whole thing here in the film, where he's like saying to her, strike me down, and then you will truly become what you were meant to be, which is basically he's going to control her, I guess. Because if she kills him, then he becomes a Force ghost, a Sith ghost. And then I guess because of that, he can enter her. But then it's like, why don't you just kill yourself? Why don't you just get somebody else to kill you? And then you become the ghost, and then you can just enter. It makes sense. You just pull out a mallet, just start whacking. Oh, it feels good. Oh, chunk yogurt. Oh, put on Whip Blitzer. Barbara Streisand, sexy. It's dumb, right? None of it makes sense. You have to be a moron. It doesn't make any sense. So he wants her to kill him so that he can enter her and control her. And then he opens up the thing on the ceiling, this big temple or whatever with all these hooded people in it, and he shows the battle. And the battle's, it's the exact same thing. It's like it's going bad. Like you got gazillions of freaking star destroyers, all with these big penis like things that can wipe out planets. And there's too many of them, right? Like the Asian guy in the Y-wing or whatever. And so she's looking up, and she's frustrated, and she can't take it. She doesn't know what to do, because she kills him, then he'll Force ghost into her, and then she'll become, or he'll become her, I guess. You just look at J.J. Abrams, man. Just take a good look at him. What are you gonna do? I mean, do they? I mean, somebody must say at some point. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make. Why? Why does she? And then again, too, it's like he's trying to get Kylo Ren to kill her the whole time. Right? He's trying to get Kylo Ren to kill her, but he didn't really want to kill her, and that what he really wanted was for her to come there and kill him. And it's like, well, why were you trying to get Kylo to kill Rey all this time? If you wanted her to, why don't you just call her over and tell her, come to whatever it's called, Exogen? I don't even know. Exegol. Come to Exegol. Come take a vacation in Exegol. You can hang out with good old Palpatine here. And he doesn't even look like Palpatine, too. He looks different. Like, he looked so good in the Return of the Jedi, right? His face. And I guess you could say in the third one there, when he fought Yoda, he looked pretty good then. His face is all melted and whatever. He looks different. It's like his face isn't melted or whatever. None of it makes sense. None of it makes any sense. So then the Resistance is fighting the Final Order, because they're not New Order. They're not are they the Final Order? Are they the Last Order? I can't even. I wouldn't. Which order are they? They're the Final Order. The Final Order, the Last Order. Anyways, they're fighting his fleet, and then Ben shows up there on Exogen or whatever, and then you got the Knights of Ren, and it's like, who the hell are they? They show them throughout the film too. It's like they're the most useless group of people ever. Like, in all of Star Wars, there's nobody more useless than the Knights of Ren, because the whole time they're following, I don't know, they're following Rey or they're following Kylo or both or whatever, and they're always there. They show them, it's like they're on some planet and they take off, and then there's the Knights of Ren and they're watching, and then they're on some other planet and they take off, and there's the Knights of Ren and they're just watching the whole time. And then finally, when Ben shows up, and he doesn't have a lightsaber for whatever reason, right? And there's the Knights of Ren, and he's got to fight them, and he just rips through them. I mean, it's just what was the point of these people? I mean, what are they? Are they Siths? Are they? I mean, do they have the Force? Again, it's just selling. You're gonna just sell action figures, right? Toys and Happy Meals and stuff like that. You're gonna have all the Knights of Ren are all gonna have their own names and their own characters, and then you're gonna have to watch all the cartoons and the spin-off shows and the video games and everything else to find out who these characters were and what their whole lore is, because there's no point trying. Well, I mean, they're not gonna explain it in the film, but anyways, yeah, he rips through the Knights of Ren like they're a bunch of toddlers, right? I mean, he just wipes them out really quickly. And then Palpatine starts using the Force against the fleet or something. I mean, all of a sudden he's got like his powers from Return of the Jedi to this film are like 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold. I don't know, because he just and he had these bolts of lightning coming out. Now he's able to wipe out an entire fleet. He's like from the ground, like they're way up in the sky. They're thousands and thousands of feet up, and he's shooting massive amounts of lightning at them, and he's wiping out their ships and all this. And then Rey, who's all, she's been beaten down or whatever, and she's getting up, and there's the voices of the Jedi are all in her. She's got like Luke and Obi-Wan and Yoda and whoever else. I mean, it's all the Jedi voices, mostly Luke saying, get up, you are a Jedi. You are the last. You represent all Jedis. You have the power of all the Jedis in you, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So she she gets her strength back, and then Palpatine attacks her with his lightning, right? The lightning that he's using to wipe out the entire fleet. But she has 2 lightsabers at this point for whatever, and she's making the Saturn X sort of thing. And he's using his lightning on her, but she's just walking forward, and then the lightning's melting him, basically. Mm-hmm. And then she basically kills him because the Rey, isn't that what he wanted? He wanted her to kill him, and then now she kills him. But for some reason that doesn't work out now. He wanted you to kill him the whole time. That's what he wants. You kill me, strike me down, so I can enter your body. And it's like, so she kills him. She melts him with the cross lightsaber thing. Then he's just dead. There's no Force ghost, no Sith ghost, I guess. And then Ben dies or something, or does he die? I can't even remember. It's like did she die, or I think she dies. All right, so so dumb. She dies because of, the having to use all her Force power, all her feminist powers, her Mary Sue powers. She dies, and then Ben, now he's Ben. He's no longer Kylo. He's Ben. Get it right, man. Ben comes and he brings her back to life. He uses his Force touch, brings her back to life, just so he can kiss her. And it's like, oh, okay, well, they're gonna kiss. Maybe they're gonna have a family. And no, sorry, he brings her back to life. So, and then he dies. Of course. And he dies. Yep. So, and then meanwhile, up in the meaningless big battle up in space with all the tens of thousands, millions, billions of Star Destroyers. I don't know. Just think of thousands. Just think of as many Star Destroyers as you can think of. As many as they can fit on a screen. That's basically how many there were. And Lando wipes them all out with his force of, of inclusive, diverse rebels. All the people with the, all the funny races with the different heads and bodies and all that. Yeah. And then Rey goes back to Tatooine, I think. Yeah, she goes back to Tatooine, and she goes to where Luke's home was, because, living out in the desert, it's so much better than being a star pilot. And some old lady on some weird creature comes up to her and says, "Who are you?" And she says, "I'm Rey." And then she looks around, and all of a sudden Luke appears. Luke, the beards and the robe and all that crap. And he smiles at her, and she goes, "Rey Skywalker." And it's the end of the movie, and it's fucking terrible. It's awful. This movie was just awful. It's awful. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Not saying something. I've seen some real stinkers. This was a terrible, terrible movie. I don't care who you are. If you like this film, I don't even, stay away from me, please. You're too dumb. Just take the mallet out. You don't even need the mallet. You just probably all day you're just walking around, walking in the walls and stuff, saying, "Oh, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. What's Star Wars?" It's just awful. It's an awful movie. It's a terrible film. None of it makes sense. As I said at the end, it's like all this exposition, all this crap, all these stupid planets that they go to, and these just so they can sell toys, remember, and push the whole diverse and open borders and all those agendas that they're trying to push. Disney, of course, being the beast. But they go to all these places, and none of it means anything because the whole time, I mean, like, you could have saved the whole movie. I mean, the whole movie, they could have just started. And it's like, you have Palpatine. Palpatine comes back, just send Rey a message. I'm here on Exogen or whatever that stupid planet's called. I'm here and come and see me. It's Grampy Gene is here. Exogel, is it the Ewok planet? I don't know. If it's not the Ewok, how did the Death Star fall on it? I mean, if it is the Ewok planet, why does it have such big waves? And then they show the Ewoks for a little bit, and the Ewoks are looking, and they know everything that's going on. They're all happy. They're cheering. There's all these explosions in the sky, and things are blowing up, but somehow that's good for them. I guess they like lots of falling debris on their planet. Their beautiful green planet with giant redwood trees and all this crap. None of it makes sense. You have to be a moron. The worst people wrote this film. This film is absolute garbage. It's one of the worst films of all time. The new Star Wars trilogy is officially worse than the prequels. Yes, officially worse than that. Those are the prequels where it's like, I don't like the desert. It's all rough and dry. I mean, like, even those films, even the stupid kid and the Jar Jar Binks is infinitely better than these films. I have to say it. I mean, it's almost like if you were to say to me, hey, you got to sit down and watch Star Wars. You can't watch the original series, but you got to watch Star Wars films again. I'd be like, whoa. I'd be like, please, but I would choose the prequels, 10 times out of 10 over these new films. I mean, maybe the first one is watchable, but it's also dumb. And it's also got all the stupid agendas. And it's got the Mary Sue character of Rey, who's impossibly amazing at everything instantly. Can instantly fly the Millennium Falcon way better than anybody else. Trained pilots, trained all their life, born as clones or something, right? And trained in the best conditions with the best, and yet she's way better. She can fly way better than anyone else. And then she strikes down a Sith Lord. She beats Kylo Ren in the first time they fight. Right? I mean, how is that possible? I mean, you never even trained. You never even wielded a lightsaber before. Now you're beating a Sith Lord? A Sith Lord? I mean, none of it makes sense. But then again, you could say, well, at least that film had a good sort of plotting to it. It introduced the characters. The characters seemed to be likable. It seemed like it was the old style of Star Wars. It had the old feel to it. It was rough around the edges, beat up. The droids, the whole look of it had paid a lot of homage to a lot of the characters from the original and the canteen scene and all that. It really tapped into nostalgia. But this new one is just terrible. It's awful. It's one of the worst movies of all time. It really is one of the worst movies of all time. It really is. It's up there with Mystery Science Theater, right? The Hand of Manos or whatever. Manos, The Hand of Fate. It's right up there. I mean, that's probably a better movie. It's take the worst movies of all time. Trolls 3 or whatever, Trolls 2, I don't know. Take the worst movies of all time. This one's right up there with them. In fact, it might be even worse than those movies. Because you could probably watch a lot of those movies and you say, well, the story makes sense, the plot. It's a terrible movie, but it's terribly acted. Now, the acting is whatever. I mean, the main characters are passable in the acting, but I mean, you expect that at this point in time. I mean, it's not like they just walked into their roles. They've had plenty of time to get them down. So Kylo Ren, Adam Driver, Daisy Ridley, they're passable. They do a decent job with, I guess, what they were given. But the story's so dumb. Palpatine is completely wasted. They should have just started the new series and had a different story arc, and Snoke is the most irrelevant character in the history of Star Wars. It was like, this guy, he looked like he was going to be a badass and really interesting, and they don't explain anything about him. I mean, there's nothing explained about him. It's just that Palpatine was using Snoke and all these things all the time. And now Palpatine's whole character has been so cheapened by this as well because it's just terrible. The movie's just awful. It's just awful. One of the worst movies I've ever seen. Don't go and see this. Never give any of your money to Disney. And like me, demand a moratorium on Star Wars. No Star Wars for 100 years. You should ban all of Star Wars. Yeah, absolutely. I don't care. You call me a dictator. Ban all Star Wars. Anybody who displays Star Wars in public will be arrested. You need to keep your toys in your home. Don't go on the internet. No more Star Wars. No nothing. No Star Wars spinoffs. No Star Wars, cartoons, shows, video games, nothing. No Star Wars. No more Star Wars ever again. Because the original one is the only one. It's the only one. The original trilogy, that's it. Everything else is garbage. I'm serious. Everything else is garbage. Everything else. All the shows, the cartoons, everything. It's all garbage. The original one is the only one that's worth watching. It's the only one. And if you're going to let your kids watch Star Wars, that's all they should watch. You don't want to subject them to the prequels, and you certainly don't want to subject them to the New World Order programming of Disney. Disney is the beast itself, and Disney is going to make gazillions of dollars off this, regardless of how terrible it is. So, anyways, that's my take on Star Wars. The, what is it called? The Skywalker. This is the last sky. The rise. Is it the last sky? The rise of the sky. It's not even Skywalker. What are you talking about? What is Skywalker? What does Skywalker have to do with it? It's Palpatine. She's a Palpatine. She's not a Skywalker. Oh my God, it's so dumb. I mean, and then you could say, well, maybe Ben, at least he was half Skywalker, and that's what I was thinking. I was watching. I'm like, okay? She's Palpatine. Who's the last Skywalker? Is it Ben? But isn't he Solo? Wouldn't he be the last Solo? I mean, you could kind of twist it and say with the feminism and everything that technically he could take the name of his mother and Leia was a Skywalker, even though she didn't know she was until later. And you could say that maybe is the last Skywalker, but the last Skywalker is Rey, who's actually a Palpatine. And holy freaking hell. These movies are an insult to any intelligent being on the planet. I mean, dolphins shouldn't watch this. You shouldn't put gorillas. Don't let them watch Star Wars. If you got chimpanzees, don't put on the new Star Wars because it's bad for them. They're too intelligent for this stuff. And I don't think anybody should watch this crap. I know millions and gazillions and billions of people will, but it's doggy-doo, folks, and it's New World Order programming to the max. And that's why everyone should totally boycott Star Wars from now on. Anyways, I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you enjoyed it at the very least, and maybe you could share it. I don't know. I mean, it's one of these attempts for me to maybe get some mainstream people listening. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe. It's possible. Anyways. Let me know what you think. If you saw this film, hopefully you haven't, but if you have, hopefully you saw it for free. And if you did pay to go see it, please go and get your money back. Please demand a plan. Demand a plan. Go and say, I want my money back. I saw this film, and bring them the receipt and say, this is the worst film I've ever seen. I've done this before. You want to ask me? And say, yes, Jesse has. Absolutely. I've done this a number of times for films where I've gone and I paid to see a film and I demanded my money back. Oh, yeah, I can even name a few of them. Maybe I'll skip it this time, but I'm telling you, I have done this before several times where I've gone to see movies, and they were so bad that I would go and ask for my money back after. True story. So, even if they don't give you your money back, just go and do it anyways, just to let them know how terrible it is. If you go and see the movie, and then, I don't know how anybody could sit there. You see, when I'm watching it, I'm doing like other things at the same time, right? So I'm multitasking. So it's not like I'm sitting there like, just eating fucking horrible junk food and just getting programmed. I'm actually working in the background. So I have the film there. And so even though I'm doing work at the same time as I'm watching it, I'm like, this is just awful. I just wanted to shut it off. I just had no interest in watching, and it got worse and worse and worse as a story. It was the dumbest movie I've ever seen. None of it makes sense. What are they doing? They're riding up a... There's actually a scene. Think about this. There's actually a scene in the film where they land with a ship on top of one of these Star Destroyers. Are you with me? Right? The ship opens up and a bunch of horse-like creatures come out. And they're riding horses on top of a Star Destroyer. That's how dumb this film is. It's retarded. It's terrible. And the characters are awful, and the diversity and all the feminism and all this crap is just awful. Hey, J.J. Abrams, you are a terrible, 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 terrible director. You should never be allowed to direct. You and Adam Sandler and all these other jokers, Kathleen Kennedy, you should pay everyone back. You should pay out of your pockets. Everybody that's ever gone to see any of these films should be reimbursed to the full. And all these films should be banned from humanity forevermore. There should be 100-year moratorium on Star Wars. No Star Wars. Nobody. You mentioned Star Wars, I'm going to lock you up. That would be beneficial for humanity. I mean, the real thing, folks, is just turn your back on all of it. It's all evil. It's all terrible. None of it's beneficial to you. It's nothing but destructive to people. It's terrible, terrible mind control of the New World Order. Don't watch any of it. Don't support it. Don't feed it. Starve these jerk-offs. Anyways, let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, your comments, and all this on this atrocious film. And I apologize. Yeah, man, this has almost gone on as long as the film. Anyways, thanks for listening. Have a great day.